Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm your host, Rebecca, and it's Friday. We're going to do the Friday dance. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's something I do on Fridays while I'm spilling coffee all over the yarn. No, not a good thing. Hello. Today we're going to talk about day 2 of the Chad Daybell case. Now, you can get this information anywhere, but if you are a crafter, you're going to want to get it from this channel because I do it in a format that allows you to listen along while you're crafting. Today, while I'm trying to get my first cup of coffee in, I slept in today. Why not? I'm going to be working on this shawl. Yes, I'm actually making 2 of them exactly the same. But I'm doing it at the same time. I'm doing one row on one and one row on the other. This one is going to be for a gift for a friend of mine, very close friend of mine. And this one is going to be a giveaway on the channel. Once I finish it, I'm going to do a member Patreon giveaway. So if you are a member of the channel or a Patreon, or you become one between now and then, you'll be eligible to win this gorgeous shawl when it's finished. Oh my goodness. Anyway. Welcome back. Day 2 of the Chad Daybell trial is in the books. Week 1 is in the books. There's no trial today. So on Monday, I'm going to be bringing you up to speed on the Arizona Rancher trial. And if you don't know anything about the Arizona Rancher trial, look back on my playlist, the podcast list, and catch up on those. All of my podcasts, you can tell by the thumbnail which one goes with which. I try to keep all the trials separate. But this Arizona Rancher trial is very, very interesting. And it's not one that's being covered by Law and Crime or Court TV or one of the bigger YouTube channels, but interesting nonetheless. It's just taking forever for this trial to get going. All right, where was I? Okay, I already did it wrong because I'm not paying attention. Okay, this is supposed to be a single crochet here, but that's okay. We will carry on. Anyway, once I get the pattern down, I'm good. So, just got to make sure that because I'm working on the back side, so I just got to make sure that where I'm putting the stitch is really where I want it. Okay, get back to Chad Daybell. So only one witness. We have only heard from one witness, and that is Detective Hermosillo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, I apologize, Detective Hermosillo. You have done a fabulous job in this case. If you want to see the first part of his testimony, that would have been yesterday, day 1. He was back on the stand for day 2. When he ended his testimony on day 1, I'm going to catch up on all that. But if you're not familiar with the Chad Daybell case, Chad is on trial in the state of Idaho for conspiracy to commit the murders of Tylee Ryan. She was 15 or 16 years old at the time of her death. J.J. Vallow, who was 7-year-old autistic child at the time of his death, and Chad's former wife, Tammy Daybell. He is conspiracy to commit those murders, first-degree murders of those 3 people, and fraud because he tried to get Tammy's life insurance afterwards. Yeah, and too sweet in a hurry because they needed to get to Hawaii to get married. He married Lori Daybell. This all has to do with this weird cult that he was trying to cultivate that sprung up out of FLDS. That was kind of sort of their origin, the FLDS, but then it went way far afield of FLDS. This trial is going to get crazier and crazier if you're not familiar with it. So Chad may not have committed these murders himself, but keep in mind, he could have done so through his influence on other people. And that's where I think this is going. His defense attorney is trying to throw his newest wife, Lori Daybell, under the bus, as well as her deceased brother, Alex Cox. Now, Lori has already been tried and convicted on all of these same counts. The additional count she was convicted on was Social Security fraud, because after her children's deaths or murders, she continued to get their Social Security checks. And her new husband, Chad, were just living it up in Hawaii on that money. It's kind of sickening, isn't it? Anyway. So day one, we get the Hermosillo on the stand. He ends his testimony. He details everything he did and how he got involved in the investigation, everything he did along the way, and how it led to finding J.J. Vallow's body. And that's where we left off on Thursday. So today, he's back on the stand, and he talks about after they recovered J.J.'s body. J.J.'s body was buried on the property of Chad Daybell. He had a 4-point-something acre property, and it was out in the area of this property that the police had learned through other family members was a site where they buried their animals as they aged and would be deceased. They would bury them out in this pet cemetery, and the area was marked by this ceramic dog. So that's kind of how the police sort of honed in on this area, because with 4 acres of property, how did they know to look there? Well, that's how they knew to look there, through interviewing of family members who said this was the pet cemetery. So they dig up J.J. Vallow's body, which was under a tree near a pond near this pet cemetery. Following this, they take the body, put it into a body bag. It was already in plastic. They put that into a body bag. They transport it to the hospital where the morgue is located. Now, in East Idaho, they don't do autopsies. There's no medical examiner to do autopsies. Why not just do them at the morgue? They don't do autopsies. They had to drive this body to another location for an autopsy, but we'll get to that. So they drive the body of J.J. Vallow to the hospital and put him in the morgue. Then they go back. Hermosillo goes back to the site and goes back to near the fire pit, which was also near this whole pet cemetery thing. And by this time, they are digging in another part. And as they're removing the soil, same thing happens. They're starting to get this smell of decomposition, which could not have been very pleasant. Oh my goodness. And they're having to just slowly, like through little tiny instruments, sift through this soil because they don't want to disturb anything, bones or anything that might be evidence. So they are very carefully sifting and trying to tolerate the smell. And according to Detective Hermosillo, they did this for hours, but they could only do it for a few minutes at a time. So there were quite a few of them out there. There was quite a large representation from the FBI through their evidence response team, and they're all out sifting, but they would have to take turns. When the smell got to be too much, they'd have to stand, because they're kneeling also. They would have to take a break and go somewhere where it smelled good and then come back. So eventually, he talks about as they're removing these layers and the smell getting worse, a green object comes into view. So they're seeing this green object and they're like, what in the world is that? It turns out it's a green bucket. Now, here's where the testimony gets really gross. I'm just going to tell you. If you want to fast forward through my description of what was found, please, I won't be offended. In any case, it was described by Hermosillo as what was in this bucket was globs. And he goes, forgive me but that's the best description I can give you. Globs of flesh, charred, burned flesh that was decomposing with teeth and hair. And it just, yeah, gross. Anyway, so they're thinking, okay, we can just, several of us, lift this bucket out and put it into a body bag. Well, the bucket breaks. And now they're having to sift through the soil to get all of this glob stuff up and all the bones and everything. So they put that into a body bag. I mean, this has got to be something that traumatized those people. I would have needed therapy for the rest of my life if I had to do that. And I was a crime scene investigator. Once upon a time in my, going back years and years, I never had to do anything close to that. No, I just took pictures and stuff. I dusted for fingerprints and took photos, but sifting through the topsoil to find bodies, no. And did I mention that Chad Daybell, in his employment history, used to be a sextant at a cemetery? It means he maintained the cemetery. So he knew how to maintain these plots, apparently. So he talks about they get her body bag, they take it to the morgue, the hospital morgue, and once they get there, they decide they need to get these bodies for autopsy. So the coroner puts the bodies in his vehicle, and then the officers follow him to the nearest place where an autopsy could be performed. And I don't recall where that was. If it was Boise, it was be like 6 hours away. So they head to, I'm trying to see where I am with this. Okay, they head to the coroner. So they get there, and it's probably 10 o'clock at night or so. So the officers leave. Detective Hermosillo, he leaves, and he comes back the next day and suits up, so to speak. They have to put on booties and all that stuff for autopsies, and they observe the autopsy. And that's routine. Officers often observe autopsies of decedents, so that as evidence is gathered, they can be present. And anyway, we're going to hear from the medical examiner. And as it turns out, the cause of death for J.J. Vallow was asphyxiation. He was suffered. He suffocated inside that bag. What a way to die, right? So after the completion of J.J. Vallow's autopsy, and we're going to... The jury was shown photos. We were not, thank God, because I always tell you guys, I don't need to see autopsy pictures. I really don't. I believe you. You tell me that it was horrible. I believe you it was horrible. You tell me that was J.J. Vallow. I believe you. He described J.J. as having, let's see, what was he wearing? I should be reading my notes, shouldn't I? I wrote it down. Hold on. So he was wearing, where did I write it down? Okay. So when they put him on the autopsy table, J.J. Vallow, he's in this plastic bag, so they have to cut the plastic bag off of him. After that, the white plastic bag was over his head, and black duct tape surrounded that. So once that was removed, it was evident that there was a piece of black duct tape all the way across his mouth, and his wrist had been bound by duct tape. His ankles were bound by duct tape. He was wearing red pajamas and black Skechers socks. Yeah. And then all of the duct tape, just horrible. So once that autopsy is completed and everything's, cleaned up from there, the medical examiner brings out the body or what was recovered for Tylee Ryan, and he looks at it and he goes, I can't do anything with this. There's nothing to autopsy. There wasn't enough parts of the body to autopsy anything. So a cause of death for her was never determined. And the medical examiner, when he takes the stand, he will again explain it to the jury. But I think I'm going to skip that part because I don't need to hear that again. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And Hermosillo, when he described that they were sifting through the dirt and everything, I mean, because he said this took hours, all day long it took them. And he said there's helicopters flying overhead because the news had gotten wind that they were out on Chad Daybell's property looking for these kids, because the whole country was looking for those children. It had been that well publicized. So they had to put up tarps, and, it's just, the whole scene was just horrible. So I'm trying to see what I missed okay, so at the end of the first day, at the end of them finding J.J. Vallow, before they found Tylee, it was later on in the day after they took J.J. to the medical examiner, or to the morgue. So they get back there, they order these 2 huge trucks with lights on them. They come out, and then they have officers assigned to guard from both agencies, or several agencies, that were doing this excavation, to guard the site overnight. And then they all came back the next day, and this is when they spent the long hours sifting, and the helicopters are whirring overhead. So then we get the cross-examination by the defense attorney, and he is all over the place. Like, he's talking about things that the jury don't even know who they are yet. He's talking about Melanie Gibbs and Melanie Gibbs' new boyfriend, Mike. And I'm sure the jury has no idea who Melanie Gibbs is, and no idea who this Mike is. And at that point, every time the prosecutor would object, the defense attorney would just keep going. He would just keep talking. And the judge finally had to admonish him. He says, listen, you need to be quiet when there's an objection so I can make my ruling, and stop talking. Stop talking. Because he would just keep going. So at one point, finally, the prosecution objected that this was beyond the scope of direct examination, because they had never brought up these people. So he's like, well, I have him under subpoena. I'll just call him during my case in chief. Okay. Not unusual. Yeah. So he talks about how he goes all the way back to the searches, when Hermosillo was talking about searching those 3 apartments. And in one, they find a large cache of weapons. And that was the apartment that Alex had been occupying. So he got Hermosillo to admit that the weapons were presumed to belong to Alex Cox. And he did a lot of throwing Alex under the bus. Yes, and backing it over. So he said he got Hermosillo to admit that the defendant was not charged in any way with the death of Charles Vallow. Now, I hope you guys are following the bouncing ball. Before Chad Daybell gets involved with Lori Daybell, before he even meets her, she has her husband, allegedly, she hasn't gone on trial for this yet, but she is actually in Arizona awaiting trial for the death of Charles Vallow, her third husband, Charles Vallow. Yeah. Who was shot and killed by Alex Cox. There's no doubt about that. But the doubt comes in on whether she conspired with him to do that, or was it an accident like they originally thought? Because originally that's how it ended up. Oh, this was, it was an accidental shooting. No, it wasn't. But Alex is not around to defend him. But this is before Chad is even on the scene. So, no, Hermosillo admitted, no, he was not charged in the death of Charles Vallow. Nor was he charged in the attempted murder of Brian Boudreau, who was he was the nephew of Lori Vallow, because he was married to her niece, Melanie Boudreau, who changed her name to Melanie Pulaski, I think. There's a lot of players. But Melanie Boudreau was staying in one of the 3 apartments. Alex was staying in one because he was a member of this cult. So was Melanie. And I believe they had identified Brian as being dark and they wanted to have him killed. So they sent Alex up in Tylee's Jeep to shoot him. So he does point the rifle at him and he shoots, but he misses. Shatters the driver's window of Brian Boudreau's car, but he does miss, thank God. So Lori is pending trial on both of those charges in Arizona: the death of Charles Vallow and the attempted murder of Brian Boudreau. But now the jury has heard that this defendant had nothing to do with either of those. Okay. So then they got into this whole thing about the paintball gun. Now, I'm sure the jury's like, what is this whole paintball gun thing? So on October 9th, so Tammy Daybell passes away on October 18th through the 19th. But back a week before that, on October 9th, she had gone out to run some errands. She had actually gone to one of their FLDS women's meetings, and they had made frozen meals. They do different things at these meetings, crafts sometimes, but sometimes they'll just put together frozen meals. So they had put together these frozen meals. She comes home, and all of a sudden there's this guy standing there pointing. She thought it was a paintball gun. It turns out it was probably an AK-47. She startles him, I guess, and confronts him, and he flees. But he gets off a few shots, but he doesn't injure her. So she calls for her husband, Chad, who's upstairs. He doesn't call 911, but she called 911, and we do get to hear her 911 phone call. So long story short, this was probably Alex Cox. Yeah. And the defense attorney wanted, again, to throw someone else under the bus besides his client. My client, that wasn't my client. It was Alex Cox. Yeah. It was determined that he had, through what we're going to hear evidence of cell phone extractions and, where Alex's phone was and when. But on that day of that paintball incident, he had been on the property several times. Now, at the time of the paintball incident, his phone was somewhere else, but he may have just left it somewhere else, and he was on that property. We don't know. So that was the cross-examination, which was kind of cut short by the judge because the defense attorney's like, after he got shut down a few times for going beyond the direct examination, he just said, well, I'll just ask him all these questions when I have him during my case in chief. Okay. Which is fine, because it'll probably make way more sense to the jury than what you were doing yesterday, because I am sure the jury has gone home very confused, because this is a very complicated case. And I'm sure they're thinking, what in the world was going on here? Because they have not heard anything about the cult, anything about the teachings of Chad Daybell and Lori Daybell and what they were espousing. And yeah, it is messed up. It really is. All right. Did I do this right? I think I did. Except I wasn't supposed to do that extra stitch there. Okay. Because right now I'm, where am I? Am I in the middle now? I am in the middle. I'm in the wrong stitch. Okay. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. I'm supposed to be right there. Okay. I'll get it right, people. I'll get it right. All right. That's what happened in the Chad Daybell case. So I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be live on Sunday at 11 a.m. Central. Bring a cup of coffee. We're going to dish the dirt. And I hope to see you then. We're going to show off what everybody's been working on all week while you've been listening to the podcast. And I'll show you what I've been working on. Give you progress on these. And I'll see you then. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye.